2 weeks on the green list. The Balearic Islands are going to be given, as we've just said, an amber rating. It means that only some people will need to isolate after returning to England.
Passengers arriving back from Mallorca, Ibiza after 4 a.m. on Monday may have to quarantine if they haven't had a double vaccination at least 2 weeks before travelling or are under 18. Our minister this morning is Robert Jenrick. He's the Housing Secretary. Very good morning to you,
morning.
Mr Jenrick. I want to put to you something that Mark Drakeford, the minister, First Minister of Wales, said to us a little bit earlier on, basically saying he wishes you wouldn't change the rules on exemptions for the double jab from amber list countries. He says it's difficult for people in England currently to know what's required. It's difficult for all the 4 nations. You told them as a UK government that there would always be a 4-nation approach, but we're all going in different directions and it is leading to confusion. What's your response to that?
Well, clearly it would be better if all the 4 nations of the UK could move as one, and the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps is in constant contact with Mark Drakeford and his other colleagues across the United Kingdom. But we do think it's appropriate, given the rising number of cases and the situation that we're seeing in some other parts of the world, that we take this step. We will fortunately very swiftly be moving to a position where it will be easier to travel, because if you're going on holiday or business travel to those amber list countries from next week, then when you return to the United Kingdom, you won't have to quarantine as long as you've been double vaccinated. So there isn't so long to go until we're in that somewhat less restrictive regime.
If we're talking about confusion, let's move on to masks. I mean, this story has been sort of crumbling like an old building since the beginning of the week, and it's now a total shambles, certainly in England. I mean, in Wales, it's still a legal requirement to wear masks in many public areas. We've got city mayors across the UK and certainly in England who are introducing their own bylaws to insist that people wear masks on public transport, and maybe some other places. This morning, or rather overnight, Sainsbury's and Waterstones have announced that they expect and they will insist that their customers wear masks. I mean, it's a total shambles, isn't it?
No, I don't accept that, Richard. As a result of the vaccine rollout, we're able to move into a new phase, and that's one where we all exercise our own personal judgment, and organisations and transport operators like TfL or the tram here in Wolverhampton, where I am this morning, will come up with their own judgment as to what's appropriate for their setting.
Yeah, but that's not personal judgment.
And we'll reach sensible judgments on that. If you're on a closely packed tube train or tram from Wolverhampton going into Birmingham, then it makes perfect sense to continue wearing a mask. If you're on an empty train, then I think many people will come to a different judgment and say, well, there's nobody around me, therefore I don't need to.
I must pull you up on this. It's not a personal judgment. If I get on the tube train in London, it's not my personal judgment whether or not to wear a mask. I've got to wear a mask because I'm being told to by the authorities, on the tube, on the bus, in taxis. If I'm in Manchester, I'm going to have to wear a mask on the trams there by decree. It's not my personal choice. So I'm sorry, we don't have personal choice in these areas. If I want to shop in Waterstones or Sainsbury's, you could say it's my personal choice to cross the threshold, but if I do, I don't have a choice about a mask. They're going to make me wear one. So it's not personal choice anymore. It's, I mean, the freedoms which you claim your government has given us not to wear masks are being completely eroded by corporations and by mayors.
No, I don't think that's fair, actually. You will be able to exercise your personal judgment, but also businesses and those people who are operating public transport networks, for example, will also make judgments about what's right for their setting. And I think that's a sensible way forward. We're going to be living with the virus in one form or another for a long time, and so we should be moving into a different phase now that reflects and respects the fact that there's a huge diversity of different business and setting across the country, and those settings like a tram, for example, that might be quite closely packed, will come to a different judgment to a train which might be very empty, for example, or a small business which is quite tightly packed, like a bookstore, for example, might come to a different judgment to one where it's very unlikely that people will be in close contact, and so they'll do something different. And I think that's the right way forward, because we might be in this position for some time, and we don't want to make this a very restrictive, one-size-fits-all legal framework. We want businesses and individuals to be coming to pragmatic judgments based on the individual circumstances.
But with respect, Minister, you just riposted to my question by saying that I was wrong and that we will still have personal choice. But how can you have personal choice if you are getting on a tube or a bus or climbing into a taxi when the rules of that city tell you that you have to... I don't have a personal choice. I don't understand why you keep telling me that I'm wrong. You're telling me that black's white.
Well, because in many settings, we will be exercising our own personal judgment, but we're also leaving it up to businesses to say that they're going to ask customers to wear masks where they think it's really important. And we as customers should respect the judgment of those businesses and the staff who work in them, because hopefully there will be very sensible reasons why they've chosen to do that. And the examples that you've quoted to me, like a tightly packed commuter train or a tram in Manchester, seem like sensible settings in which to continue wearing masks.
Okay.
As I say, Waterstones, well, many of their stores might be quite small. People might be lingering reading books, and it might be perfectly sensible for people to wear masks. So I think we just have to respect the judgments that those businesses are coming to, and where the businesses are not being prescriptive, to exercise our own personal judgment.
As a government, Robert
to be able to do that in a sensible way.
As a government, and we've heard the Health Secretary say this, you expect people to carry on wearing masks indoors. Now, we've been told, on the one hand, it's personal responsibility. You've said it's business responsibility. So what will you do if you go into a shop which hasn't said that you need to wear a mask because perhaps they don't feel that they could enforce it? Are you going to carry on wearing masks indoors?
Well, I'm certainly going to keep carrying a mask with me. I'll respect the judgment that any business or transport operator has come to and follow the rules that they're asking me to do so. And then I'll use my own judgment. As I say, it will depend on the setting. If you're going into a small shop where you're likely to come into close contact with other people, or if I feel that people will be uncomfortable if I don't wear a mask, then certainly I'll wear one, because I want to make sure that people feel reassured. If I'm going into somewhere that's very large, very spacious, very empty, then I may well not to.
In enclosed spaces. He expects people to do that. You're his colleague in Cabinet. So if you feel it's your personal judgment that if you're in a room with him and you don't need to wear a mask, but we know that he expects you to, what happens then?
No, I didn't say that. I said that you'll come to different judgments depending on the type of setting that you're going into. If I was going to a tightly enclosed space, or if I was going into the office and there were lots of people around me, then it would be a perfectly sensible judgment, as the Health Secretary has set out, to keep wearing a mask. If you're sat on a train, maybe going home to my constituency on a Thursday night, there's no one else on the train, and the train company have said in those circumstances it's fine to exercise your judgment, then it would be perfectly sensible to choose not to.
Okay, I want to ask you about...
I don't think it's quite as difficult as perhaps you're suggesting, because I think members of the public are well versed in this. We've all been living with this now for over a year, and I think we can exercise that degree of pragmatism depending on the situation that we find ourselves in. Let's talk about
pragmatism when it comes to the app. The headline in the Financial Times this morning: business sapped by staff shortages as COVID app orders workers home. Up to 20% of staff are absent. Are you going to fix the app?
Well, we are looking into this, and we'll be setting out our plans in due course. So I can't say on your programme exactly where we're going to land on this, but you're right that the app is currently leading to quite large numbers of people being pinged. That's leading to significant absences. That's particularly important in some settings like health and social care. For me as local government secretary, it's also having an impact on the delivery of other important public services. So we want to come to a pragmatic and proportionate approach, but it is still important that if you do get pinged, you take the action that's being asked of you until we reach a decision that might be to ease
Robert Jenrick,
the way in which the app operates.
if a worker or a business feels that that person hasn't actually been at risk, perhaps they've been wearing a mask or they've got PPE or they're double vaxxed, would you say that they could then exercise their personal responsibility and decide not to isolate if they're pinged?
No, at the moment, the guidance, the rules are very clear that if you do get pinged by the app, then you should be self-isolating. If in due course we can move to a more perhaps proportionate approach, where if you've been double vaccinated, then you don't need to do that, but you'll test yourself, you'll make sure that you don't have the virus. Of course, if you do test positive, then you should be self-isolating. Then we should be doing that. We haven't quite reached that point yet. We're analysing the data and we'll be making a statement if we can as soon as possible.
Well, you are going to have to do something urgently, aren't you? Because it's not just that people are being pinged and ignoring it. More and more people are just switching the app off. We know that as a fact. So, I mean, you're losing control of the situation. You're going to have to come up with something that people can see is credible and that they believe in. When do you think, very, very quickly, one sentence, when do you think we might have a decision on this, how you change the app? Just one sentence, please.
I think it will be soon, but remember, what's driving that decision is the vaccine programme. We're at 84% of the population now that's had one jab, 2/3 of the population have had their double jabs. The critical thing is to get the double jab proportion of the population up. If we can do that, then it will be much easier to move to that kind of proportionate approach with pinging that you're suggesting.
Well, good luck with that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't mean that ironically, I meant it genuinely. Good luck with the increasing the double vax.
Yeah. Just Robert Jenrick, thanks very much indeed.